Welcome to another episode of Coder Conversations. Today we have composer Michael Worth. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, man, thanks so much for having me on. It's great to be here.
Great to
Oh
have you
man,
on, man. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, you know what? This is a great way to like kick off the fall, right? Just like, although I don't know when it's going to show, so whatever
Yeah.
may not be this one. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I'm really excited to come and nerd out with you guys over some cool composing stuff.
oh absolutely.
Totally.
So yeah, to just get it started, can you give the audience a little bit about your background, who you are, and what you do?
Yeah, that for those of you who don't know me as a household name. So my name is Mike Worth. Michael, Mike, doesn't really matter. My online handle is actually Farkle. So if you see me up on various social media stuff, you'll sometimes see that little handle. I started in film and television in about 2006, 2007. Worked on a couple of TV shows. Worked on a show called The Wonder Pets, a show called Yu-Gi-Oh. Did a couple of bits for films, and gradually pivoted into the video game industry, where I've actually been pretty much full-time composing for the video game industry since about 2010. So I started, and we'll get into the details on this. I kind of went into an area that you don't typically see, which is mobile games. So I've done about, I don't know, 20 or 25 mobile video games in the last 10 years or so.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, it's a good amount. I know how to write catchy tunes. So, and
Right.
I've done the occasional feature film. My training was actually originally in film scoring. So there's a couple of fantastic films on Amazon that you can check out. I think it's Mind Rage and the seminal Vampires on a Boat, which got released last year. So if you want to check out some quality cinema, that's there. And hey, man, it's not a gig if you don't do like some sort of low budget thing, right? So
Yeah, totally.
yeah. So currently, I'm working on a couple of video games. I also have a small studio that I just started called Magic Moon Games, which is a true, I actually am owner. We're actually building 90s throwback LucasArts inspired adventure games. And, I do what typical musicians do. I teach online. I'm at Think Space Education. And, when I'm not doing that, I go down the street to Malaki Flow and I box and do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to keep the old
Oh
age.
wow.
Yeah, I'm a weird
That's
dude.
pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool.
It's cool if I was good at it. It's kind of sad, right?
But it gets you out, right? It gets you out of your head.
Yeah, it's exactly right, man. Like I love composing. I love being in the studio with all the toys, but after 3-4 hours of it, you gotta just get away. You gotta just do something
You
different.
need to unplug. Yeah, you need to decompress for sure.
Yeah, 100%. So that's kind of my background right now. I'm sure I've given you more than enough tasty morsels for us to dive into.
And I see you went to NYU, right?
Yeah, I did a graduate program there in what was the degree? It was like film scoring and jazz composition, I think is what it was, or something like that.
Oh, awesome.
Oh
Yeah,
man,
NYU is a really quality school. That's awesome.
yeah, I don't know how they let me in. They were great, man. I was so blessed. I had a guy named Ron Sadoff who's still there, who ran the film scoring program, and I walked in and I was like, man, I'd gone to an undergrad at a really avant-garde school. And I walked in and I was like, dude, I'm a jazz guy. I'm a film scoring guy. I love Jerry Goldsmith, Alan Silvestri. I was like, don't make me do all this. Teach me to write scores like the stuff I grew up with. And Ron was like, yeah, we're going to do it right away. And so he just threw me in. And
Yeah.
the guy who ran the traditional composing was a guy named Dinu Getsu. Rest in peace. He passed away about 10 years ago. And just beloved. He was the sweetest. I think he was Hungarian, and he had studied under Jerry Goldsmith. And he basically was the kind of composer you love, where he was just like, any technique is on the table if it helps you connect with somebody else's soul. He was like, you want to write beautiful romantic,
Absolutely.
right? Like I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He was the first teacher I'd ever had in the classical world, who I think it's because he studied under Jerry, who basically said that. He's like, technique doesn't matter. It matters about your artistic soul, your expression.
Your feel, where you're coming from, your
Yeah.
your groove. Yeah.
Right. What you want to express, what you want the person to feel and hear, and then the technique becomes your palette of colors. Oh, I need a sky blue right now, or I need a deep orange.
Exactly. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand that or misunderstand that.
Yeah. So now for you guys run this podcast, so everyone knows. But like your background, because you're both also composers and musicians, right?
Oh
That's
no, me, I'm a software developer.
Yeah,
Ooh.
Kevin does programming. I do video game composition. I'm also a drummer. So I do session work, I do lessons.
Yeah. So as a drummer, how cool is it that your rhythm can impart melody? I did not realize.
I love the drums. Yeah, no, the drums are a very earthy kind of instrument, and it's kind of like the way someone put it to me one time was like, oh, I want to be the drummer because the drummer is like the quarterback. I don't know if it was Buddy Rich who said that. He's like, yeah, the drummer is like the quarterback, and that's really interesting because when you also hear the term like you're only as good as your drummer. The band is only as good as the drummer is. And I think there's a lot of truth to that because the drums are setting the foundation. They're setting the infrastructure.
Yep.
And then the bass, comes right on top of that. And you want to groove well with the bass, but the drums come first.
Oh, 100%. And I'm a big fan of like, I grew up playing in like prog fusion, prog rock bands and stuff like that. And not only does
it's like Genesis and Yes.
Right,
all that.
oh yeah, my top bands, like my top ready, it's like Rush, Genesis, Yes, probably like Police, Pink Floyd, Queen. It's like there it is, like
what about King Crimson too? Bill Bruford.
King Crimson,
yeah,
all
Robert Fripp,
Supertronics, all that stuff. Those guys are great. Like I think I like isn't that the opening of Watch for the Skies? Like all that stuff. I used to know man.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I love Yes, Close to the Edge. That record is something else.
It is amazing. Like it's such an impressive thing. All right.
It's like a whole album. It's a whole album and a song. It's like 18, 19 minutes long.
Yeah. The song Close to the Edge is just like this tour de force. And then, okay, for all of you who haven't checked this out on the podcast, the song And You and I, out of nowhere, has this absolutely gorgeous soaring melody. Remember that one? It's like what is it?
Yeah.
That one? Out of nowhere. It's like this gorgeous, like beautiful thing, right? And yeah, oh my goodness. And Bill Bruford in that was just on fire. He just
Bruford, everything's so tasteful. So much thought given to each bar.
Exactly. And by the way, funny enough, you're mentioning about that, about, being locked in with the bass and being the foundation. There's a bit in Close to the Edge where I know the bass and the drum groove, but they're in two different time signatures. The guitar is going like da 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 da, and the bass and the guitar, or bass and the drums are just doing this great bounce, bounce, da bounce, down, bump, bump, and Bill,
right.
He's like playing the bass part with the drums. It's like he's not doing a pocket. He's like dialed into Chris Squire. That to me is like when I thought the drums, that was next level when I saw that with the drums. I was like, oh, the drums can be melodic. They can be.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bill Bruford really taught me depth. Or like, Nick Mason, Pink Floyd. You really learn the depth of the instrument from listening to those guys, like Live at Pompeii, Pink Floyd.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, what a fantastic album. And a video too. Oh my God.
Oh, the video is kick-ass. Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I think what I learned from Nick Mason and Floyd, because when I was young, I was all about like speed, and I was like, the faster the better. And Pink Floyd would just sit back and they would just be very, like they would just
it's kind of like Nick Mason is always pulling the time back. Because like with feel, I primarily teach feel and groove to students of all ages. And to me, it's like, well, you have it as a drummer or any instrument, but especially as a drummer, because the drums come first. You could lay back, you could be behind the beat, you could be right in the center, right in the center of the tune, or you can be a little faster on top of the beat. So in every song, you have that choice of, are you going to lay back? Are you going to play just right down the middle? Are you going to play a little rushed, like depending on what the beat that you're playing? And so, Bill Bruford and Nick Mason really taught me, okay, you can really slow something down without changing the tempo. And so like Nick Mason will do the triplet fills to kind of give it that slowing pace, but it's not actually adjusting the tempo. The tempo's staying the same.
Right. But he's just kind of sitting back on the back end of it. It's and conversely, Stuart Copeland is always ahead of the tempo in that really. Everything
Absolutely.
is just Synchronicity 2 is just like, that song is just, or even Synchronicity 1, well, anything he does. But yeah, like you're like, man, you can feel him like not rushing in a not super coherent way, but like he's definitely like driving the gang forward with his energy. It's fantastic.
Sure.
I've been definitely learning more and more about percussion. I mean, I was a drummer, although not to your level. Like I was a drummer when I was in high school. Like I was the so the story story time with Farkle. I was in a prog rock band and I was the keyboard player, and the lead singer was a complete narcissist. And whenever he wasn't singing, he would charge back and like kick me off the keyboards, and he'd play because he also could quote play the keyboards. And so I would have like nothing to do. And so the drummer, I've been training with him for like a year, and he's like, let's just get you a second kit. You can kind of do the Phil Collins thing and come back. So I'd actually do the Phil Collins thing and like double up with Scott and stuff, which was a lot of fun. And it's when I realized, like, I would double up on some of the Pink Floyd stuff, and it's when I realized, like, man, the drummer can dictate the band's kind of like level of not tension, but like level of excitement. Because when I would sit back,
that's kind of what I'm getting at with like being the quarterback. You're dictating the tempo, you're dictating the whole feel of the track, and it's like there's a lot of responsibility that the drummer has given that role.
Totally. It's and I'm seeing it now because in video game music, especially the projects that I'm working on, there's a lot of percussion. It's a lot of these, big taiko-y stuff. And so I'm trying to like take those lessons and be like, all right, we can all be big and fast and loud, but can we actually be tasteful? Because it's like, that to me is so much of composing is like aesthetics and taste. It's skill, but it's also like when to Yngwie Malmsteen and when to like David Gilmour, right?
It's kind of like, Bill Bruford is kind of showing you like you can push it really far, you can play really fast, really busy, but then you can lay way, way off of everything and just, let the keyboard player shine.
Yeah. So we're all over the place. You need to rein me in if I get like too far off because they're just like going. I just finished in the middle of my sent it off to my mixing engineer. I have a really good friend named Dave Grossman, who you guys may know. He was in a band called Rosetta, and Rosetta is kind of a good mid-tier heavy metal band. Like they're really good, but they've toured globally, but they're like they've like opened for like Cradle. I think they've like opened for like Cradle of Filth and stuff like that. So they're like,
okay, so pretty big.
Yeah, they're
pretty big.
So he took a bunch of his guys and he did this new post-rock project called New Miserable Experience. And they've got a couple of really good songs there's a reason for this. So they did a song called Tides of Oppression that dropped like, I think like in July. And so maybe June, and Dave pinged me and he was like, do you want to do like a super dreamy cinematic piano cover of Tides of Oppression? And I was like, yeah, man, that'd be cool. Well, look, I've never done that before. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
And what was cool was I've got some decent piano chops, but the aesthetic of this piece was very slow and beautiful and thoughtful. And I was like, man, this is not like anything I've ever played before, but it's just so like,
what you're talking about, that's reminding me of like Bill Evans from Bill Evans Trio.
Yeah.
Are you familiar?
Live at the Village Vanguard. Oh yeah.
Well, Explorations. The album, like Explorations, it doesn't get much better than that for me. when we're talking modal jazz, that's like at the top.
Yeah, and he was so comfortable, almost like Debussy, with just sitting on these harmonies, these kind of beautiful, that kind of stuff, right? And he would just let
just very beautiful, very tasteful. And someone said of him, I forget who it was, they said they never heard him play one wrong note, not one misstep his entire career. Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, I would believe that 100%. He was completely always very aware of why he would voice a chord a certain way, why he would,
everything was intentional, in other words.
Yeah, and man, that skill, like I'm a screw up with the keyboard. I mess stuff up all the time, and so you have that kind of control. Is just so amazing. It's funny. I kind of reverse engineered back to him because when I started writing and getting into like composing and arranging, I'm 50 years old. I was born in 1973. So my real big time was like late 80s, early 90s. So I was into like a lot of like Yellow Jackets, Chick Corea, Electric Band, Rippingtons.
Chick Corea, Spain.
Oh yeah, oh man,
I love that.
He was just
Vinny Colaiuta, right, on drums.
Yes, I think so. Yes, like that. He was definitely. I think he was a drummer for that one. Yeah, I know the Electric Band really well. That one I have all their albums, so I know it's like Frank Gambale and Dave Weckl and that whole squad.
Yeah, very cool.
Chick Corea, not only was he a great improviser and had some really great melodic instincts, he was a great educator. I don't know if you've read some of his books. Like he has a book called A Work in Progress. That's kind of how he thinks about composing. It dramatically affected how I write music for the better.
Oh, wow. Well, no, I've never read it.
You guys should read it. It was so cool. He had this thing that he said where he's like, whenever I write a piece of music, I'm always finding the game. And I love that idea of a very playful way of composing and the idea of like, there's a pattern somewhere, like there's song
like a motif.
Yeah. And it's not just a motif. It's also like, what's like, is the game, the drummer does something and then the keyboardist does something. Is the game, how high can I get my solo until I've gone too high up the keyboard and we got to come back into the groove. So it's like these little mini games throughout the piece.
Right.
So sometimes it's like motifs. Sometimes it's, that kind of stuff. But sometimes it's like, there's a piece called One of Us is Turning 40 from Chick Corea Electric Band. And it starts off and it's like, some of this. It's something like that. But the whole hook is like, that's the groove. And it's like how much cool stuff can happen around it while the piano player is doing that groove. And so the sax and the guitar are trying to like find little dances and like you said, little motifs. But the whole point is they're just like, the game is, this is going on over and over again for 30 seconds. And how can we,
like, how do we fit into the game? Basically. Yeah.
It's a very cool way of thinking about music. Cause it frees you from having to be like, oh my God, I've got to do a 2, 6, 5, 1 circle of fit. And that's fine.
And I'll tell you though, like with Prague really is diving into a lot of different types of music at once. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I in terms of like, they're just every genre is on the table and everything can be pulled in and
that's what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah, 100%. Which is, I think, the beauty of Prague. It's. I know people can say it's pretty intellectual, and I'm like, okay, yeah, but it's also like the ultimate in terms of like everything's on the table, right? Like, oh, we'll borrow random Eastern Indian, scales because that's cool,
right?
I don't know. So whatever happened with like Prague in terms of like, how did it evolve? I mean, I've kept somewhat current, like obviously Porcupine Tree, although they're not really current, like quote, they're from like the 2000s.
No, I know what you mean. Or like Tool.
Yeah, Tool's got some great stuff, man. I played Schism with a couple of bands, and I was like, man, that's a sweet piece of music right there.
Yeah, that's a great track. I really like the beginning drums on that track.
With those little sub rhythms on the hi-hat. Those are sick.
Yeah, it's so tasteful.
Yeah. So now I got to ask the question, which is, how are you with Neil Peart?
I wouldn't say I'm a fan, but I'm not a fan. He's just kind of like middle of the road for me, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. Like sometimes Neil could be very divisive for drummers. Like it's kind of like if you
Right.
love Neil, if you hate him, you hate him. And I think it's good to be like, hey, he does a thing, and the thing is obviously really good. He does his thing, right? And
that's the thing. He's really good at what he does.
Yeah, that's what it is. And I think what I love, so Rush is my favorite band, but I also know that Rush is not like, they're my favorite band despite being Rush. Does that make sense? It's like Getty's got a certain.
Well, I think the vocals are probably off-putting to a lot of people, and they'll just skip the whole discography because they're like, nah, I don't like the singer.
Yeah, and they are themselves. I mean, they're like, we're gonna do a 22-minute rock opera about the year 2112 and like Priest. Right. You're like, okay,
yeah.
But I always liked about Rush, and this, by the way, it's funny because this I see on our thing. It's like, Rush Hour 3 composer. We're going to talk about professional stuff. Man, hard work never doesn't pay dividends, and Rush is a hard-working band. Like they all are. Those guys are. Yes, Bill Bruford is a hard-working drummer. Like I remember seeing a video from the 90s, and he walked through some of his fundamentals and some of his rudimentary stuff that he would do every day, and I was like, yeah, man, you're hardworking. Like,
I saw a what do you call it? He did a drum clinic at a university in Connecticut. I grew up in Connecticut.
Nice.
He did a drum clinic. Yeah, I'm from Bridgeport. If you know Bridgeport.
I live in Fairfield. I'm like 2 towns over.
Oh, Fairfield. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Fairfield County. But he did a drum clinic at I don't know if it was New Haven University or somewhere around there, and it was amazing. It was just to see his hands, his technique. It was incredible. Yeah, no, I feel lucky that I was able to see him in person.
Oh, 100%. Because it's just, you see also.
Because I'm younger, I wasn't around when he was in ES or when King Crimson was touring with him.
Yeah, you're a pup. You're a babe in the woods. I'm now the middle-aged dude, man. I was like,
yeah.
I can't believe it. I love when you see these guys doing any sort of masterclass. Like for me, Jordan Rudess, obviously a synth god, and you see so much of what they practice comes out of their own self-analysis. They're like, I want to be good at this. I don't care what rudiments, Mike Portnoy is doing. Mike Portnoy is awesome at being Mike Portnoy. I want to be better Bill Bruford. Right. And so they'll do these things. Like Bill Bruford has that, what's that thing in funk? It's a style of drumming where only one drum hits at a time. So if you're going like boom, boom, dat, dun, dun, dat, the hi-hat never hits when the snare hits. It's a very funk technique. You know
there's I think that guy Chris Penny has the same. Used to be in Dillinger Escape Plan. Do you know that drummer?
Yeah, I know the band, so I'd have to go listen to him. But yeah.
Okay, but I think he had that kind of style where you'd play notes, but you never play like a hi-hat and a snare at the same time.
Right. It was a big like funk thing in the 70s. I think Funkmaster Clyde, those guys would do that kind of thing. And Bill Bruford does it. That's why his drums, I think, are so light sometimes, because it's like only one drum is playing at any one time. But he builds a pocket, but he's not on the semi-open hi-hat, kind of like just
No, I mean, I think Bill Bruford has an excellent, excellent sense of time. He just really knows where he is. Like I've heard him say in interviews, he's like, it's not my job to keep time for a guitarist or a keyboard player. He's like, I'm playing with my own time. They need to know where I am, not the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, are you the metronome, or are you? And part of being in a band is, do you follow or do you not? Oh, speaking of
which, that's the question. Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah. Speaking of which, because I know you're a video game composer too, did you hear Bear McCreary's new album Singularity that dropped a couple of months ago?
No, what's it like?
Okay, so you all know Bear McCreary, right? And this is good because we're going to talk, because video game stuff is like where I've been for the last like 15 years. So you all know Bear McCreary. In my opinion, he's the greatest television composer of our generation. He just can't write bad music. Like he's just, and you look at his credits, it's like, oh, he did Human Target, he did Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., he just did The Rings of Power. Whether or not you like the show, his music was amazing. He just did.
Wow.
I mean, the dude just can't write bad music. And he drops this teaser in like January for this album called Singularity, and it drops on Spotify in like June or whatever. It's like super technical heavy metal, like really good heavy metal. I'm like, Jesus. And like the guest stars on it, like Rufus Wainwright's on it, Slash is on it. Like there's a couple others.
Wow.
It's not a poser doing metal. Like you listen to this, you're like, this dude grew up with metal. You need to check it out because it's, I mean,
now is it chiptune or what is it?
Well, there's everything has a metal like background, but whatever artist is guesting tends to influence. So Rufus Wainwright kind of gets a little bit more folk, but it's not like ED. It's not like super electronic. Like it's definitely like just like here. Let me see. I'll play a little bit of it. Hopefully, this won't get us like struck down for the podcast. I'll play like 4 seconds of it. Yeah. So one of the things, by the way, one of the things that you have to learn when you're a game composer, this is good for you to check us out because my clients are all over the world, is that you have to be able to stream audio decently, like from your rig. Just like you have to be able to do something. Because like my clients right now are in like San Francisco, Brazil, North Carolina, and China, and I live outside of Philadelphia. So
wow.
Yeah, this is one of the nice things about being a video game composer is like if you build your career, you can really work from anywhere. So here we go. Let me find.
Yeah, that's amazing.
You have to build it. You have to like start small, and you have to be part time, and then you have to. Here we go. Let me go to type 3. Well, actually, let me go to and mechanism. Here's one with Bear McCreary guest starring with Raya Yarbrough. I don't know, but here it is. This is the.
Okay.
Here we go. Let me get to this. No, this isn't. This is like. This isn't the metal thing. This is more like symphonic stuff. Let me find one. Here it is.
Yeah, I like the drums.
Yeah, those are chunky drums, right?
So what kind of style would you say this is?
Oh man, I'm gonna date myself as a completely old fart by saying this. Would that be, I would originally say prog metal, but it might be quote new metal. You know, I would say prog metal. Very intelligent
prog metal. Yeah, prog metal.
Yeah, well, especially when you get those really tight little bits of groove that like cut out and are gated in the mix, so that there's lots of clarity. Like doom, da, da, bum, bum, boom. It's not just like flam strumming like as fast as I can. You know, it's the
just
guest
shredding or whatever. Yeah,
like really melodic, very technical. And the whole album is very much, but you hear what I'm saying? It's like very produced. It's very, I mean, Bear's in LA. It's going to be polished. It's going to have that kind of it's not going to be like but it's, it's just like I like the LA sound. It's got a good polish to it, but you should check it out. It's a really, Bear is a really, not only is he very intelligent and very soulful, he was trained with some of the best. I mean, he's trained under Elmer Bernstein for like 2 years. And if you know who Elmer Bernstein is, he was one of the great Hollywood composers. He did the Great Escape. He did Magnificent Seven. He did Ghostbusters. He did Spirited Away. I'm not Spirited Away. Sorry, To Kill a Mockingbird. Spirited Away
he did Ghostbusters. That's great.
Oh, yeah, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like that's just it's such a little happy little lick. But yeah, like one nice thing about the video game industry is that as the games get more and more cinematic, people who have a cinematic background are able to kind of score them. It's, I love the classic stuff. I love the early SNES Mega Man where you're just doing these kind of cool little battle loops. And, I worked
Mega Man, the Mega Man music, Mega Man X.
Oh, it's amazing. All that stuff. Yeah, it's basically
so tasteful, so tasteful.
Man, the limitations those guys had. I mean, you got to think. I've released an album for a production library where I wrote in that style of like 8-bit, 16-bit.
Yeah, 8-bit, 16-bit. Yeah,
it is so hard to write in that style.
Yeah, that's all I write. I only make chiptune.
Oh yeah, so you know how hard it is, right? You're like, oh, I've got.
It's really hard. Yeah, it's really hard.
One of them's a noise tone. Oh, okay. There's a guy I work with over at ThinkSpace, Protodome, and he does all chiptune stuff. He has a couple of tracks up on Spotify.
Okay.
And
cool.
Same thing. He's like, I'm all about it's like, what is it? 4 tones in the truth, right?
Yeah.
So what's the hardest part for you when you start to compose and you've got that limitation? I think, what is it? You have like 2 sines, a triangle, and a noise. Isn't that those are your 4 tones? Is that what it is?
Something like that. I mean, so I write on a device called the Electribe, the Korg EMX1. It's a blue device. Do you know that?
I don't. What's the scoop of that?
Okay, so it's a groove box. So just for our listeners, a groove box is a combination of a drum machine, a synthesizer, and a track sequencer. So you can write, full compositions with different loops. You can connect all the loops in song mode. You can then do an overlay on, like, once you have everything in song mode, then you can hit the record button and do live action. You can, change beats. You can change melodies.
Yeah,
it's like limitless. Like so yeah. The Electribe, the Korg EMX1, it's like its own world. It's like its own music universe. Like you put the headphones on and you're just totally immersed in this other environment. And then, of course, like you said, you have your limitations with 8-bit or 16-bit kind of sounds. You have to get really creative really fast.
Yeah, right. But I find that those limitations, there's a phrase, limitations breed creativity. It's one of my favorite phrases. And because it's like, I can't.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because you can't like chase samples and you can't chase synthesizers. You're like, I got a sine wave and I got a triangle. I better write something. Like, go, right? There's a guy, man. All right, this is I did this a long time ago and it was really cool. There's a guy named Jake Kaufman. You might know him as, his handle is Vert, and he's a really talented video game composer. But he kind of is like in the mid tier of games. He did Shovel Knight, the big one he did, but he's done a ton of games. He basically got hired as an audio lead at some small little studio out in LA. He used to do something called MIDI Madness, and you can actually buy it. What he did was this: he did every Monday or Wednesday, he and his buddies would get online. This was back during the days of like AOL and ICQ chat. It was back in like early 2000s. And they would go,
AOL, yeah. Everyone had it. That was back when everyone had AOL.
Yeah, I mean, this is
yeah.
Like, oh my goodness. So he and his buddies would get together and they would go, okay, we're gonna come up with a made-up video game and a made-up level. And then for 1 hour, we're gonna speed compose only using general MIDI. So it'd all load up QuickTime general MIDI, and that was it. And they got so fast. And the guy, Jake, he sold his album, which I bought because it was so amazing. After he was doing it for 5 years, every Monday, just speed composing. And he was getting to the point where he was doing 5 minutes in an hour of fully fleshed out, arranged music, like full rock band. He was so fast because it was general MIDI. It was like, oh, this is my string patch. I'm just going to do something with my string patch. But his
right, you're working within your limitations.
Yep, and you're focused on the music. You're not auditioning 45 snare samples and being like, oh God, what's the best snare? And yeah, and I mean, it's very much a trial by fire, But like the stuff he was writing, man, let me see if I can find some of it. Like there was some crazy stuff. And you can look him up. He's on Spotify. Like he's done a whole bunch. Like, he did the DuckTales remastered album in 2014 and did like a chiptune version of DuckTales, and it's amazing. But I always loved that, and I actually did MIDI Madness when I first graduated from college, at NYU. I got together with some of my buddies, and we did that for about 6 months or so, and it definitely helped. Like, you just have to go with your first idea. You have to be obvious. Like if someone's like, oh, we're going to be doing, you're in a level and it's a French diner. I'm like, we're doing tango, or we're doing accordion.
Right.
You got to go.
Accordion, yeah, right.
Yeah, right. You got to go. You can't sit here and start, fiddling about. And I think that's the hardest.
You have to just jump on it. You're saying.
Yeah. Well, and that's the hardest part about a composer is just getting started, right? Like, how do you get started when you open up?
In music in general, one of the composers that we had on recently, he was like, with music, it's never linear. It's never a straight line. Like you get pulled into this direction, you get pulled in that direction. Like you never know what's coming up when it comes to music.
I think so. I think it's nonlinear. I think I've definitely had times. I was working on a cue today for this. I got lambasted by my mixer because he's like, this cue took 4 days longer than it should. It's like, but I was going through my, there's a story behind this, but I was in my digital audio workstation, which for those of you dear listeners is what we use when we're scoring all inside our computer. It's called the DAW, digital audio workstation. There's 1,000 of them. There's Cubase, there's Logic. I use Studio One. It basically lets you record
Pro Tools, Logic,
There's a Performer, there's 1,000 of these things. And there was a point in my composing today where I had a chunk of music, and then I had a block of like 10 bars that was just empty. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to write there yet, but I know I got to get from section A to section C. It's going to be about 10 bars. I'll get to it later. Right? Because you got to gnarl through it. You got to gnarl through the chord. And that's It's like, I know section A, I know section C. Don't know how to get from one to the other. We'll deal with that tomorrow. Kind of thing, right? So that definitely.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm working on something, I'll usually have, just certain loops figured out ahead of time. Like I know what the intro is going to be. I know what the first bridge is going to be. I know what the chorus is going to be. And then it's really about, once I have those loops, then I dive into more like the sequencing part of it, the song mode. I dive into song mode and start chopping up. Okay, let's do 8 bars of pattern A. Okay, let's do 4 bars of pattern B. Or then I might reverse it to see, what if it's backwards? Does it sound better? Because some songs, you'll write it forward, and then you can compose it backwards in song mode, and it'll sound completely different, like a completely different song, but with the same loops, which I think that's what's fascinating about composing to me is like you can write something in any which way, but depending on how you phrase everything, the way where are you putting the loops, how are you ordering them, like it makes such a huge difference in the final outcome.
Oh, absolutely. And that to me is going back to the whole chicory thing of the game. Part of me is like loving that, where it's like, let me take this little thing that I wrote, let me permutate it. Let me make it down instead of up. Let me make it, back to front, like the what do they call it? Like retrograde or whatever you want to call it. It's like just whatever, or let me expand it, like the Indiana Jones theme. I love that, where it's like, right. So that's that. Then they contract it, right, and then they expand it, right. Like so, it gets smaller, and that's the thing. It's like, what can I do, to make this theme kind of get bigger and smaller, and that's kind of the that's kind of the fun. And
what do you think about a guy like John Williams?
I mean, there's only one answer I can give.
Like Jurassic Park, man.
Yeah,
that theme in Jurassic Park where they're first coming down in the helicopter.
Yeah. Yeah, the I play at my local church. I play at my church down the street, and whenever I'm finishing up stuff and the priest is kind of bringing down the altar after communion, I will take film scores and I'll try and I'll put them on the pipe organ, and I'll play like once a month in the pipe organ, and everyone's like, "What a beautiful thing you played at the end." I was like, "You can thank John Williams for that."
You can thank John Williams.
So, you know what? Like John Williams, I love John Williams, and I had a moment in my career where we all have this moment where I just realized I was never going to be John Williams, because I was trying to study John Williams to be John Williams, and I was like, I'm never going to be John Williams. He thinks about things in such a way that I can never do that, because he's just amazing. He's once in a generation. But what I love about John is,
yeah, he's a genius.
He's a genius. But here's what's amazing. So I would study like his cues, like his little action cues, where it's like, right, like this kind of stuff, and it's all like all total stuff where he's just like,
So what do you call that?
That's like, well, in terms of like techniques, it's like he's just doing like all the extended jazz stuff, like polytonal, like all this polytonal stuff, like this kind of stuff. He's doing these bitey chords where he'll do like a dominant chord, and he'll like all this gritty dissonance. That's all the Nazi stuff, like. But but what I love is when he does a theme, he is so obvious and so like grabs your heart, like right here. Oh, it's like he just like here.
Yeah.
This is a boy finding his best friend, and it's like he doesn't get all crazy with dissonances and with bitonality and stuff. When he gives you that theme, and boy, I don't know. I think when I think about discipline, I think about that. Like when I was in undergrad, it was gauche. It was not like cool to be like emotionally transparent. Not talking about emotion, like we're hanging out having beers. I'm saying like for a person to come up and go, I think what I wrote is beautiful. Everything had to be intellectually smart. And I was like, no, man, like the technique is there to support what you want to say to your audience. Like what you want to say, if you want to say something beautiful and folksy, say something beautiful and folksy, if you want to say something gross and say it, right?
Absolutely.
So I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, but I mean, John Williams, his craft is it's just complete A-list, but his instincts. But here's the thing. He has an interview where he talks about the Indiana Jones theme, which is one of my favorite. There's probably my two favorite movie scores he did were Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T.
Nice. Yeah,
great. I mean, well, it's so hard. It's like,
nice.
But I'll say this, then I got to ask what your thoughts are on John Williams. John said it took him 3 or 4 months to come up with the Raiders theme, and it wasn't. He sat.
Oh wow.
But he wrote it, polished it, thought about it, wrote it, and he said that theme is what I need for the movie. And then he said once the theme was done, the movie just wrote itself, because he would either drop.
Oh sure.
So
yeah, sure.
He didn't spring out of like Aphrodite in the sea foam. It wasn't just like, hey, I just thought of. He gnarled through for 3 months or maybe even 4 months. So you always got to work, So what's your take on John Williams? What's your thought?
I think he's amazing. I think, to whatever movie he's working on. Didn't he do the score of Home Alone even?
Oh yeah. And did some beautiful.
That's a really beautiful score. I mean, it's a very funny, comical movie, but the score is just beautiful.
Yeah, totally. And if I may, Brian, he's aging well. Like I had a moment where I felt old. And here's why I'm saying this. I was saying, oh well, Williams, his seminal scores. We're talking like Jaws and in E.T. and Close Encounters. And my buddy, who's in his 30s, who I'm writing the score for Warden's Rising with, he was like, you know what mine was? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, the Harry Potter series. I'm like, oh, you're right. In the 90s. And then Brian was also the prequels. He's like the Revenge of the Sith. I was like, oh, you got your dose of John Williams as an amazing person from the 90s. And I'm sitting here all like, well, E.T. nothing else he wrote. And Brian was like, how about all all that, whatever all that stuff he did with the
That's pretty
stuff. Yeah, like he's still writing great stuff. Like his score for I'm saying Water Horse. It's not. What's the one? War Horse.
So like, are you influenced by guys like Bill Evans, that modal jazz? Does that like creep into your composing at all, or not? Not really.
I think so. I think so yeah. Now we're getting to the whole like, how do you write? And if you ever want to hear the stuff that I'm writing, just look up it's a bunch of mobile games. It's actually kind of cute. There's actually like these mobile games that I've worked on. People have taken the music that I've written and made little YouTube playlists with them, so it's kind of cute. So
wow.
one of the games, yeah, it's kind of cool because I like see these like comments and they're like, "Dude, this music slaps so hard. Who composed it?" And I was like, "That was me." So I'll promote myself for a sec. The games the big games that I worked on that you probably could find the music for on YouTube are Matchington Mansion, which is a very, very pretty little casual game. One called Project Makeover, which I couldn't believe got traction because it was me doing 90s EDM Chicago dance music. And I was like, I'm not very good at this, but I
oh, nice.
And then one called Realm Defense, which is kind of the more traditional orchestral stuff. So I would definitely say, so now we're into the whole, how do you think about music? When I say I'm modal, I'm modal and I love the Bill Evans sound and I love the Lyle Mays sound and stuff, but I'm more about whatever harmony I'm on at that moment. How am I voicing it? And this like, so for example, like, so I have the keyboard. So like, here's a classic, like G minor 11th chord, right? It's a classic, like stack third. It's beautiful sound, but these notes, and if I revoice them, I can get these stacked fifths. And what a difference! Same notes, but this to me is like melancholy, like gray winter day. Or I can do what Joni Mitchell does, where she'll revoice it as like an F major triad over a G. This kind of stuff. Right. And so
nice.
It's me trying to like come up with these like, how rich do I want the chords to be? Because I might not be in a mode. I might be here in G minor and I might go to like a B flat minor to get this kind of like sus sound, right? So the modal to me, like, okay, and this is a little thing. I know I'm talking a lot, but you asked me on this show. So there's a system of composition that I studied and I graduated in called the equal interval system. It's done by a jazz composer and a jazz arranger named Lyle Spud Murphy. It was written in the 60s. It's a really, really good course. It's not for everybody, but I loved it. It's long. It's 1,000 pages. It takes you about 3 years to get through it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He talks about how anytime you're on a route, right? He's like, you can just build a scale and a chord over that route. You don't have to worry about being in a key. So he will do stuff where he'll be like in a G minor here, and then he moves to the B, and he'll be like, I want to go to a B major ish, right? And then he'll want to go like that kind of stuff. Now you can get yourself in a lot of trouble real fast if you can tell. Like I'm losing some coherence. But it's kind of a nice way to think about it where I'm like, oh, I'm in G. And I'm like, what scale do I feel like playing with while I'm on this one bar that I'm in G? And so that's what.
So now are you saying it's kind of like you're looking at the song in like a modal viewpoint?
Yeah. It's like what I'm thinking about when I write like more like classic jazz song stuff, 8-bar, 16-bar, that kind of stuff is a lot of times the bass notes that I'm doing are definitely modal. So I'm like, look, I'm in C and I'll just do C Aeolian. Right. It's like, okay, this is all C. We're in C, but I might choose to access a different scale for any one of those. So right now I'm in C minor, right? I'm in, all these chords that I'm playing are the C Aeolian. But I might, for some moment, when I get to B flat, be like, I really feel like playing like a B flat 7 flat 9, right? And it's like, okay, like we decided.
Nice.
I know why, because you know what I get to do? I can keep that diminished seventh and then move to the G in my left hand and keep coherence.
Yeah.
So at that moment, you might be like, why'd you play a B natural there? That's not in the mode of C Aeolian. I'm like, right, but at that moment in time, I wanted to access that jazz, that whatever it is, that altered dominant scale. And that to me is how I like to write, where I'm like, I look at the left hand, and the left hand is like making a lot of sense. Everyone can hear it. They'd be like, oh yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And then on the right hand, it's like, oh yeah, the chords make a lot of sense, but every so often you throw in a little spice, and it's a really, this is something that I do right now that I'm working on for the game scores that I'm working on, where I'll do this. I'll write an 8-bar melody, but I'll do the first 4 bars in one mode and the second 4 bars in a different mode in the same key. So I'll start
the same key. Interesting.
Yeah, so like I'll be in C minor the whole time ish, but the first 4 bars will be like Aeolian, right? So very, very, and then I'll go to Dorian.
Nice. Totally different feel. Yeah,
Right.
totally different.
Yeah, and it's a really slick trick that I picked up that I really like doing, because basically if you look at the left hand, you're like, well, you're all still playing in that C minor thing, but I just decided at bar 5 to be like, well, now I'm in C Dorian. And this is that kind of freedom that I think is a lot of fun for jazz composing and for video game. And also, for when I say video game composing, I am a sucker for the Japanese video game music, all that jazz fusion. I love that stuff.
Oh yeah, all that fusion from the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, and we're seeing it nowadays in Octopath Traveler. We're seeing it in a couple of other indie games that are like really in that kind of deep jazz harmony. So, and that to me is
like you look at a game like Sonic 1, Sonic 2 on Genesis.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got walking the disco basses. It's like, of course, Yeah. So
the Japanese stuff is next level, and they were, like, we're talking about limitations. They were limited by what they would create, but because of those limitations, they got really creative and made some beautiful music.
Yeah. So how do you, when you're dealing with 4 tones in the truth, that should be a new t-shirt, 4 tones in the truth. So how do you get those upper jazz harmonies and those kind of thicker harmonies? Because it's hard. You're really limited by, like, one note has to be the bass, one note to I don't know. Like, how do you start?
Yeah, I don't know, because maybe it's because I'm a drummer, but I always go based on feel. So if something feels like it fits, I'll throw it in. And then I'll wait maybe 24 hours, 48 hours before I listen back to it. Because you know how when you're writing at the moment, you're like, oh, this is great. And then a day or two later, you check it out and you're like, no, this is not very good.
This is trash. I wrote trash. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I like to give myself that space to say, okay, how does this hit me on a Monday? I wrote it on a Saturday. How's it going to hit me today? And if it's still good, then I'll keep whatever that is and then kind of keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I think when you're writing, like, you're just creating stuff for you to evaluate. Just write with a clear conscience. I'm just throwing it down. It's okay. I can polish it if I need to, or maybe I don't have to polish it. Maybe like you come back a couple days later and you're like, yeah, this is sitting well. I did the right thing.
Yeah, because like for me, I'm always, with the chip tune, I'm always dealing with loops. So I'll have loop A, loop B, loop C. And how do we want to arrange those loops? Like the way that I arrange the loops will give the song its feel, will give the song its general vibe. Whether I'm going A, B to C or C, B to A, that's what's going to dictate kind of the vibe of the song, the feel of the song.
Yeah. So how do you handle like the larger form when you're writing? Because like form is a big part of video game music. It's like, it's not just, you just can't write just a fluid vibe where you're just going. You have to have kind of organization, because it might get broken up by the audio technology and reassembled. So how do you handle like form when you're composing for video game stuff?
That I have not actually come across, because I'm primarily making music for games that don't exist. So concept, yeah. So like all of my albums are concept albums.
Yeah, dude, that's so cool. That's so
I've got like one of them's called Water Levels. So it's kind of like music that would fit in like Echo the Dolphin, or like a water version of Mario.
Yeah, aquatic ambience from Donkey Kong, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, Donkey Kong. I have one album called Water Levels, another album called Fighter Jet, which is like, the game Raiden?
Oh, yeah, totally, yeah.
Yeah, the arcade game. So basically, I created, it's called Fighter Jet OST. And it's like, a soundtrack for a fighter jet game that was never made. and I synced it up in YouTube with footage from Raiden to give the viewer that, that real personal experience of this is what I want you to feel. When you're listening to this, I want you to feel that Raiden gameplay going on.
Yeah. And but even then you still have to do form. You can't just do just one long spun out melody.
Sure.
Yeah. So what do you do to kind of keep control? That I'm having the hardest trouble with that as I get to longer and longer pieces is keeping control of the form for video game music, because
I think it just depends on the song. I think it's song specific.
Yeah. I won't lie to you. It is hard for me to write longer form. Well, when I say longer form, I mean over 2 minutes of video game music. I was researching for the game. I was working on I'm really good at writing 90 seconds, 2.5 minute cues. I can do it, no problem. But I was researching stuff for
right.
We're working on this game right now, me and Brian, for a PlayStation called Warden's Rising, which is a lot of fun. And it's this total throwback to isometric twin stick action shooter, very 90s. Damon even said, the guy who owns the company, he's like, dude, this is supposed to be a 90s action adventure hero. It's funny. It's being
awesome.
It's being compared to Helldivers, which is, boy, talk about really cool. But we're researching some of the music from reference games like StarCraft stuff, and these guys like Neil Acree and Russell Brown, they're writing 7-minute cues. I was like, oh my god! I was like, that is so. How are you keeping control of that? It's such a
So that's what you mean by form?
Yeah, it's how can you construct a 5, 6, 7-minute piece and have it move from section to section, but also not feel repetitive or that it's too wandery or that it's that's hard.
To me, it's a naturalness. I think as a composer, you just have the ability to stretch whatever you're doing to fit that specific song. So like you're saying, if it's 7 minutes, you're going to have multiple, phrases in there. You're going to have multiple different parts that all can be sequenced together for that, overarching song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. It's got to be, it's got to be something where you are constantly looking back at what you've written and being like, how do I spin this up way? And it's that's
the way I look at it. So I'm mainly dealing with the Korg EMX1. I'm mainly dealing with loops. So I'll have one loop written, and then I'll have let's call it loop A, and then I have the middle section, which let's call loop C. And so I already have A written. Now I'm going to write C, and I know that A and C need to link up, although we don't have B yet. So since B hasn't been written yet, you have A and you have C. It's okay, those fit together. But now how do I do B? How do I kind of mix and match there? And I think that's really where the composer is bringing their light in, bringing their originality into bridging those gaps. And that speaks to your question about form. How do you get a 7-minute long song? Well, you probably have a lot of different loops that are all tied to each other in different ways, different motifs. And you can get really creative with it. Yeah, you can truly get very creative with this stuff.
Definitely. And this by the way ties into, if there's one hill that I die on always, is that I'm a big believer in studying jazz harmony and jazz arranging, because one of the things you do in jazz is you learn things in all 12 keys. And the reason being is your loop A is in C minor and your loop B is in A minor, which are fairly far away from each other around the circle of fifth. And you're how do I set up loop B to transition into loop C? It's if you have your changes and you have your chord progression in all 12 keys, you're I can get here. I can do some things. I can do some secondary dominance and do some things. And, or you just know, it's going to be easier if I make that C minor thing that I did a D minor thing. And then it's going to be a relationship of circle of fourths. And you're comfortable with looking at your score or your DAW and being I can read this in D. I don't care. It doesn't. So
now, would that be considered what would you call that?
Cheating. No, you know what I consider it is like the now you get one of my secrets, which is what I do when I write chunks of music. And one of them was like, man, if this was written in C# instead of C, it would link to the next section so much better. And I just drag the MIDI data and I just pop it up one. It's not that easy, but like you pop it.
Yeah, like it's that easy. Let me just shift everything.
Yeah, because all those samples are different triggers and stuff like that. But what it is it's understanding that the piece of music is a journey, and that one section is not so sacred that it can't be messed with for the good of the piece. And then that I think is a really important thing. I think everybody there's this awful phrase that you hear in like composing, which is you have to be willing to kill your babies. And the idea being like,
that's funny.
Yeah, like someone's so in love with the piece in E minor, and I'm like, yeah, but if you move it to F minor, it's going to work with the next section, which is in C. And they're like, but I love it at E minor. So dude, get over it and move to F, dude. Move it to F.
Just get over it.
It's not Stravinsky's Firebird, dude. Just move up and just keep going, right? So
exactly.
I think, and the other thing is in jazz, the chords can become so rich that it kind of you can get anywhere from anywhere,
Correct, like, especially if you're playing moto like Bill Evans style, Coltrane.
Dealing with upper extensions, like I was actually playing with this this little bit. I was playing this F minor thing. I was doing something, and I went to F major, and I wanted to get to somehow I needed to get to G flat, which actually sounds really pretty, just like that. It's just a little Phrygian
right.
lift. But I really want like a dominant, and I ended up as I went from F minor to F major, I moved my root down to D flat. So I'd got this, and I had this moment that was really kind of spicy. It was in the brass, and then I was like, okay, but what I basically have here is I have an F major with a D flat. But if you really voice it out jazz wise, it really is a dominant 7 flat 5 or sharp 5, excuse me. And so I resolved down to get the 7.
Interesting.
I got this, and it was a really cool moment. It was like, and it was a little bit. It wasn't on the nose. It was a little bit like, well, it was a little on the nose, but it sounded really good for what it was. And I was like, I actually ended up kind of doing a polychord because I had this like F major with a D flat underneath. And it's a pretty spicy chord. I got
so it seems like you're a pretty technical guy when it comes to all these voicings.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing yet.
I guess you'll figure that out on your own.
Yeah, right. Well, I think what I mean by the voicings is I always like a note that I play to make sense, even if the note is supposed to not be like I don't want to ever put a note in and be just. That's tough because sometimes you put a note in and you're like, oh, that sounds fantastic, like
right.
But I want to at least be able to like replicate why. So there's a great moment in Princess Leia, right?
Yeah.
Right. And there's that little bridge where the flute goes. That little thing right there.
Nice.
And I always loved playing that. And I was always like, I was like, oh, it's an E flat 6/4, and over it is an F. And I was like, oh, what a pretty little bit, but it never sounded right when I did it. And then I finally got the score from Harold Boozy and Hawks, wherever it was. And what John Williams does is he plays an E flat, and right under it, he plays an A to get this little rub. And now just listen, here's it without the A.
Interesting.
There it is without the A. Now here it is with the A. And I was like, that is all the difference in the world, right? It's all the difference in the world. And I was like,
it makes me reminiscent of what's that show, Mr. Rogers?
Yes, dude. Those
you remember the jazz? Because wasn't he a jazz composer or pianist?
He was
Mr.
a jazz
Rogers
pianist, and he got a friend of his to do the small combo, which I think was like a quartet, to do all of the music. And they were actually recording live. So when Mr. Rogers was when they were filming it, the jazz ensemble was off to the side, off camera, and they were watching it. And the piano player would be like, "Go," and they would just do stuff. And I mean, this is crazy. That was how they
and Mr. Rogers, you saying?
Mr. Rogers, it was alive.
Oh, I didn't know they did it like that. That's wild.
It was crazy, and you're right, that kind of Mr. Rogers sound, like very, like every note, you know.
It's very tasteful, very, very tasteful stuff.
So smart. And there's a couple of things that I think all composers should do at some point, only because it's going to absolutely torture them and it makes them. One is, at some point they should do jazz, because jazz teaches you to improvise. They should do theater music. Like I played live theater piano accompaniment for a while, and that was a lot of fun because you learn how to I have to like there's the theater's coming.
Yeah, it's like a different kind of approach, really.
Yeah, but
to the instrument. Yeah.
I had to play once about 3 months ago. It's a long story, but my church, our priest had to do a live taped mass, because here where I am in Philadelphia, every Sunday they have a live, you think it was live, it was a recorded mass, and it was for the people who can't get to church, and they can go and they can, say the prayers and all that stuff. But they have to fit it in 30 minutes. They have to fit it in 28 minutes, actually. And so I was playing the piano for it, and it was the craziest thing ever. My wife is the choir director, and so she and I worked in television, and I was like, we cannot dawdle with anything. We have to start the hymn right. We start. If I tell you to cut the hymn, and here's what I'm getting at, which is crazy. I'm sitting here playing. As I'm playing, I have the producer walking over, shoving pieces of paper into my face. That's like 2 minutes till cut. 30 seconds left. He's counting down. And that's what live TV music was back then. That's what Mr. Rogers had to do. So this guy's not only playing crazy jazz.
Oh, wow.
He's in front of him going 5, 4,
3, 2, 1.
Yeah. You talk about discipline and like having your chops on point. You know what I mean? It's crazy. So I was
absolutely,
so much of music is not just being able to be good at your playing and writing, but doing it under suboptimal conditions, I guess.
Well, and I think that's where the love for the instrument, the love for the craft, like if I just could, if I was like on a desert island for the rest of my days, just give me like a djembe or give me some bongos and I'll be good,
Sure. Oh yeah. I have this theory. I'm a pretty happy guy, so you can't tell. And I said this to Sarah. I said music in its purest form has never disappointed me in my entire life. The business of music has disappointed me. My own limitations in music has disappointed me, but music has never disappointed me. If that makes any sense, it's just so pure and it's so beautiful.
It's so pure. Yeah. And it's just almost like certain pieces that you write, it's almost as if you're channeling it. I don't want to say from God, but you're bringing something through you that just feels totally organic, totally real, totally fresh. And to me, that's the beauty of composition.
Yeah, there's that phrase Bruce Lee talks about where he says, "It is happening through me." Kind of the idea of like it's just
correct.
He's like the hose, just organizing where the flow of water is going. He's just like, the water's coming. I'm just directing where it's going. Kind of.
I'm just directing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what do you think you want to do next for your next set of projects and things like that? Are you like what do you think you want to go next with, like your next bit of projects?
I was thinking of doing a concept album based on Close to the Edge by Yes.
Yes, going back.
So pretty much, going back to the Prague, pretty much taking, it would be a lot of loops. Take a lot of loops and figure out how to get them all to fit together and to, create a story. So it's just, I don't know what I'll call it, but that's the next project I have in mind. Do something kind of like prog rock with some jazz thrown in, maybe some hip hop thrown in, and just kind of see where it goes, and try to do like like at least a 20-minute song, something like that. So it's like you got a whole album in one track. And that's pretty progressive. It's pretty progressive to do that, but I think for the next project, that's what I'm thinking.
That's a great idea. And I think it's good to at some point do a huge song, multiple sections, trying to like keep control of everything, create an amazing journey. Close to the every band that I love of my prog bands has one epic song like that. So Yes, that's close to the, Yes has a ton of because they have Awaken and they have like the entire Tales from Topographic Oceans, but Close to the Edge.
Roundabout, right? Isn't that like 12 minutes?
Yeah, that's like I think it's like 9 or 10, I think. But man, Close to the Edge is their monument. And then
it is.
Genesis had a song called Supper's Ready. That was like 20 minutes. Obviously,
Genesis has that track from Trespass called The Knife, which is like 9 minutes.
Yeah, that one that goes, the tone my love is about to begin, the tone.
Peter Gabriel, that's when Peter Gabriel was still in the group. Yeah,
he was great. You should check out Supper's Ready by Genesis. It's 20 minutes long. It's
Supper's Ready.
Yeah, it's a bit scrolling.
What year is that?
1973, 1974.
Oh, those are good years for prog. What's that band called? Gentle Giant. The Power and the Glory. Do you know that album?
Yeah, and I think Dark Side of the Moon is in 73 as well. I mean, 73 is and I know
it's a big year. Yeah, it's a big year.
You should check it out. There's some really crazy like groovy stuff in there in Supper's Ready. And yeah, Gentle Giant's amazing. What's that song? Just the Same. Is that the one that's dun dun bum ba dun dun?
Oh yeah, is that on Freehand?
I think it is. Yeah, man, I just love that. That song is so wonky cool. It's just great.
Yeah, no, I think now don't they write everything out first, Gentle Giant?
I feel like they do because I feel they've got like some classical background, so they actually can notate stuff. You know?
Like the guitarists definitely seem more classical based.
Yes, and they've got a lot of like canonic, counterpoint, like fugue stuff where they're like imitating each other. That's a very classical technique, right? Like the whole row your boat, like that whole idea of the sea.
Oh yeah, they're constantly going in circles, like A starts here, B starts like a couple seconds after, and then they both link up like a merry-go-round.
I love when bands take what is a kind of stodgy classical thing and make it cool. Like at the end of the day, like counterpoint can be very stodgy if you want it to be. You can go back and do like 16th century fugues but then you get a band like so we're going to take it and make it really
cool. For our listeners, what is counterpoint? Can you describe that?
Yeah, I'll show off my nerdiness here. So counterpoint is a technique where you've got two single note instruments and one of them is moving at a different rate than the other. Meaning, like, let's say you can hear this. Let's say I've got like a trumpet here, or let's say I've got like a flute and like a clarinet. If they're moving at the same rate, people might say it's counterpoint. It's not really. But if the flute is like, see how like one's like moving at a different, it's like one's quarter notes and one's eighth. That's counterpoint. And it's cool because you kind of get two melodies for the price of one instead of just playing block chords. It's a cool, it's like you can kind of.
Is that from jazz counterpoint?
I learned it as I think it was in its like heyday in like 16th century and 18th century like Europe. Like not England, but Europe. Like that was when they're doing the whole
Europe,
Like that was they're doing like Bach would write these things. They're called fugues, and it was like these kind of things like.
Oh, Bach is insane. Like if you want to work on your timing, play some Bach.
Yeah, man. Like Paul Simon used to take Bach chorales and adapt them for acoustic guitar to get his voicings and chops up, which is why he's got like when Paul Simon was like in his heyday, like early 80s, late 70s, his acoustic guitar chops were pretty badass. Like because he used Bach as like is like his Rocky training montage. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but I think people, you know, with composing, I think people, I'm really guilty of this too. And I you know, really love theory. I love it. I think they get so into the theory, they forget that it's a tool to help you compose. And that's what I was saying with like,
Correct.
you know, what the client did was they were like, we'll take the ideas of counterpoint, but we're not going to get mad if we break a couple of box rules. We're just using it as a generative jumping off point to get into, you know, writing, which is what it's all about. All these
and then like, you know, when we're talking about like modes and modal jazz, like you have all these options. You have like almost what seems like unlimited options, as opposed to like something like bebop where it's all like very precise.
Yes, and that is the so to that point, by the way, how do you Brian, keep your options from exploding and preventing you from even getting anything written?
I think I build in layers. So I'm going to start off with the drums and the hand percussion. I get that going.
Yep.
Once I've got that feel, I might put a metronome over it, but I might not. It just depends on, do I want to be like real gridded into it, real like a beat corrected kind of a feel, or do I want something that's like, you know, on the back side of, you know, kind of lazy, laying back. So then I'll do the bass line. And then once I have the bass line for, let's say, you know, pattern A, loop A, then I'll jump over to pattern C and see, okay, how can I get C to mix with pattern A? And then, I kind of build in parts. So I'll do the drums, then I'll do the hand percussion, then I'll do the bass. Usually then I'll do one synth line, and then I usually go over it with a second synth.
So that's similar to how I build stuff, although I use more traditional quote orchestra, but like I almost view it like, it's funny because you're mentioning like you know, coder convos. I'm like, I actually think I compose like a programmer, which is I have these little functions, kind of assemble and like call upon each other and things. Look, another random thing. I was a C++ programmer, and I'm in the video game industry. And even though I'm
way.
Yeah, so I was a C++ programmer when I first started. I was working on it, you know, while I was building my composing career. And even though I am a composer predominantly, if you're in games, you know how to, I use implementation software, which is object-oriented software and all that stuff. And I think that one of the great things about technology is it informs the way we create, and sometimes in a really good way. So I like what you're saying, where you're like, I'm building up these layers. Each of these layers can interact with another layer. I can subtract layers. I can add layers.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
It's a very cool way of being able to create longer pieces of music and have it be coherent, because you're like, oh, there's layers 2 and 4, now it's layers 2 and 3, and now it's layers 3 and 4, and it's all making sense, you know?
So like when I'm composing, I'm always thinking about, okay, what's the beginning? What's the end? Do I already know the ending before I even start the song? So like if I know if that makes sense, if I know where I'm going to end up, I have a much easier time getting that whole song written, because I have like this drive, I have this vision of what the track's going to be, and then I can drive it towards that, you know, bringing it home with, you know, different voicings, and like you're saying, you know, just different ways to look at everything.
Exactly, and that to me is, I think, the most important thing about being a composer, especially in today's world of DAW composing. I mean, you're obviously using your you know, your ecosystem, but is the idea of like, I can maneuver my musical materials like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, or I call it composing with Legos. So I can like you know, like take this chunk that I wrote in one synth and be like, let me throw it into this other synth and with a completely different, you know, color or a register, and just see how it sounds, and maybe I can bring something underneath it. And there's an element of I think that the world of technology right now for creatives has created a beautiful playground. And I think that as a composer, the more we can be playful, the more fun it is, which is, again, why I like working in video games. Video games can be hard. I mean, right now, we're hitting a stretch to get all the audio for early access for Warden's Rising done this Friday, and we're mostly done, but I still have about 2 minutes of orchestral music, done. But the point is, there's an element of happiness and joy, and I think that composing anything creative should always center around that joyfulness and happiness. If that makes any sense, I think that's such a great way to go through life as a creative. And these conversations are like happiness and joy. We're like playing with little puzzles. You're asking me like, how do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, I mean, that to me is like, we live in a very beautiful world right now where there's a lot of this creativity available, and there's so few limitations to just create. Back in the 30s, it was like, do you have access to an orchestra? You don't? Good luck. Now it's like, I don't care. I got synths. I can do whatever I want.
No big deal. Yeah, I got MIDI.
Yeah, I got no. You're just printing T-shirts. No big deal. I got MIDI. That T-shirt.
Yeah, no big deal.
You got to print. There's 2 that we came up with. I said one earlier today, but like you got to print that out on custom ink and start selling some merch. No big deal. I got MIDI. That's a great T-shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's probably a good spot to end it. Did you have any last thoughts you wanted to leave for the listener?
No, I mean, thank you so much for having me on this show. I think the last thought is that first of all, I'm so sorry that Brian and I got to totally nerd out over music, but you knew going in, you got to get 2 composers that are jazz guys. It's going to happen. But no, I think that the last thought I'd say is this. There's something beautiful about when you're in love with doing something, just like learning all you can about it. And so, as you're falling in love with like writing music for video games and using your synthesizers and stuff, like learn all you can about it, but don't let that take the place of just constantly create. Just like create. Do it in a way that's balanced for your life so you're not burning yourself out, but just create. Like it's so easy to just, I'll write after I learn this technique or after I learn this synth. It's like, no, just create.
Yeah.
Enjoy the fact that you get to do that every day.
Absolutely. No, well, we really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Oh man, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I unfortunately, I have to run a little bit because I got another meeting I got to get to. But this was a great. We did well over an hour. I'll take that. That's some solid
smooth.
Yeah,
pretty
Brian,
smooth, man. Pretty smooth.
Thank you for having me on the show, man. It's a really great show, and I'm going to be sharing it with a bunch of my buddies over in the industry, which is going to be awesome.
Oh, absolutely. We appreciate it. I had to let y'all get y'all conversation on. I didn't really have too much to add to it since I'm more of a software.
we chatted away, Kevin, didn't we? We chatterboxed away.
Well, it's the prog. We're talking about the prog and then the Bill Evans and then the jazz and the modal jazz. And like, you could just go on for hours about this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, man. I think that all the listeners now have like 4 songs to listen to. Each one is 20 minutes long. Get after it.
Yeah, everyone's okay. Close to the edge. Yes. Okay, let me go check what is Brian talking about here?
Yeah, right. Good. We're exposing the world to the greatness of that band.
Bill Bruford. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we really appreciate you coming on the show tonight, and we'd love to have you back sometime.
Yeah, man, I'd love to come back. Let me know. We'll loop it in and get it again, and we could, solve more of the world's video game music problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all right, everyone. It was a good show. Thanks for